Sajid Javid, what was the reason for shifting £6 billion of corporation tax revenues out of some years into the year that you have to hit a surplus target?
Well, actually, that goes back to the previous budget, where the Chancellor announced then that he wanted to change the timing of corporation tax receipts to make sure they come in earlier. A number of companies, as part of the sort of consultation process, came back and said, look, ideally we don't want this, but can you give us more time? And this is a consequence of the Chancellor agreeing to give more time. So, of course, that's going to have a shifting impact, and then that has a net result on the numbers.
You would be happy for us to see all the papers on this change and to release all the emails that have been exchanged on why you're doing it and the various arguments.
Well, I think actually
it is a bit convenient, isn't it, to get $6 billion in the last year that you need.
All the information on that is already out there. If you look, the announcement in the previous budget, the response from a lot of the companies, but the overall result of this budget, from what we've seen today, of course, there's a change in the growth forecast, if we've just heard from yourself and Robert. Some of that was to do with productivity changes. Some of it was to do with changes in the global economy. We are one of the most open economies in the world. When the OECD, the IMF, they downgrade global growth, of course that's going to have an impact.
But sorry, Robert has just told us it's less to do with the global growth than it is to do with the productivity story.
It's to do with both. And
right.
Let's look at the productivity issue as well. But that is also very important. And I'm glad you're highlighting it, because we as a country have had a long-running productivity problem over successive governments. You're something that's just been confirmed. And when there's a change in productivity, of course, it's going to have a knock-on impact. But we've also seen over the last year, as Robert just mentioned, the Congressional Budget Office, they downgraded their productivity by more than we did.
They are starting from 20% ahead of us, aren't they?
Absolutely they are.
It is interesting, because you have been in power. I know you haven't been Business Secretary, so it's not been your beat for that whole period. But, I mean, what do you think we should conclude about productivity? You've been in power for 6 years, Conservative-led government. Should we basically think, actually, productivity is just something governments can't really change? Would you
I think that would be wrong. Productivity is one of our #1 priorities this Parliament. Now, but let's just go back, because your question is, we've been in power, obviously, with the coalition government to begin with, but since 2010, our priority back in 2010 was, frankly, economic rescue. We had just gone through the biggest recession in almost 100 years. We had the biggest budget deficit of any G20 economy. We just had the world's biggest bank bailout. So economic rescue was the priority then. Frankly, it wasn't productivity, it was economic rescue. We had to get the economy growing again. We had numbers today which confirmed we have more people employed than ever before.
No, we've done very well on employment.
And now the priority of this government is productivity. And that's why, in the first few weeks of this new government, along with the Treasury, I published a productivity plan, very detailed. You're welcome to read it. You probably already had a look at it.
Have you modelled
action that we can take?
Have you modelled the effect it is going to have on productivity?
Well, it's hard. These are long-term changes. There's no silver bullet, but things like investing in skills, in infrastructure, more competitive markets, exports, that's all part of the plan. What I have modelled is that if we could match, as a country, US productivity levels...
Well, we'd be 20% richer. We could stop going to work on Friday.
Actually, it would mean something like £25,000 for every household, and that's the only way we're going to raise living standards, and that's why we take it so seriously.
OK, so just to be clear, you do think you can affect productivity?
Over the long term, there's no overnight solution.
So 2019, we can come back to you and we can say...
It will take a number of years, but I'm glad that this government is the first to actually be dealing with
this. Let's look at some of the things that you have said you will do and you have not, because the overall debt level was first, I think, going to fall as a percentage of GDP. 2014 didn't, then 2015, now it's 2016. What should we make of the fact that you failed that more than once? I mean, who's been fired for failing to meet the fiscal mandate on that really important
I think what
score?
You should make of it is, first of all, let's respect that we actually now, for once, have an independent body, the OBR, and there's a good opportunity to give credit to Robert and his team for the work that they do. They have transformed the way that we look at these fiscal events, because now we can rely on these numbers and they take into account a lot of external factors. There used to be a time when chancellors could just fix these...
So Robert didn't set the target. You set the target.
Absolutely.
Robert's merely told us that you failed to meet the target. Leave him out of it. I'm asking who is losing their job because you failed to meet your target? And you went into the election saying, trust us, we're credible and we know what we're doing.
When there's a change in forecast, even the smallest change in GDP can have a big knock-on impact on numbers. And our central mission that the Chancellor set out back in his first budget of this new Parliament was that we are going to make sure that this country starts living within its means again.
Well,
he said there will be a surplus by the
one.
end of this Parliament, and that's still what is forecast.
The welfare cap, because you introduced it in 2014. You said at the time, under Labour, our welfare bills got out of control. That is why we're introducing the welfare cap. But you failed to hit the welfare cap.
Well, again, a small change in forecast, you can have an impact on that.
We all knew there were going to be changes in the forecast. That's why lots of people said, don't introduce a silly welfare cap at the time. The people were saying at the time, welfare cap, you're going to be like 2% off and you're going to miss your welfare cap, and you have. Are you saying we shouldn't judge you on your failure to meet the welfare cap?
No, I'm saying you judge us on the discipline that we provide to try and bring the public finances under control. What we've seen since... this is an important point.
Are you saying we shouldn't judge you on your failure to meet the welfare cap?
We should be judged on our central mission, which is to make sure this country lives within its means. Now, controlling
so we should just
welfare,
put aside the welfare cap and not judge that one on its own?
No,
because you invested a lot of reputation, and a lot of people at the time said it was simply put there to make life difficult for the Labour Party. It was a partisan thing. You put a lot into it, and you appear now to be saying, judge us on the whole picture, not on that piece of it.
It's put there to install discipline for whatever
but
government
worked,
is in office.
You haven't met it.
Let's judge it on the basis that we've got this cap. If the cap's breached,
then
the welfare secretary will come in front of Parliament and explain what's happened,
is Ian Duncan-Smith going to do that?
Action.
So, sorry, is Ian Duncan-Smith going to lose his job? Is he going to apologise? Is he going to be taken to court for breaking the law and not meeting the welfare cap?
Well, what it will make sure happens is that the discipline that we've put in place works. So now the government of the day, so whichever, this isn't put in for the Labour Party or the Conservative Party.
It hasn't worked. What consequence is there to you failing to meet it? And if it doesn't have any consequence, in what way is it imposing discipline?
It will mean that when the government now looks at this, and as we've set out, is that we have to make sure that welfare is controlled as spending, that we continue to cut it, and we have the proper measures in place to make sure that we can meet our overall budget targets.
That is very interesting, and a lot of people will say it is because you have not delivered the welfare reform that you wanted, that this week you've had to go out and take more than £1 billion away from people on personal independence payments to try and get welfare under the cap. Still hasn't worked, incidentally, but to try and keep welfare down. In effect, you are asking people with disabilities to be poorer because you have failed to deliver the welfare reforms that you said you were going to.
That's not the case at all. I mean, that is wrong on so many accounts. Well, first of all, the welfare reform that we've put in place is delivering results. For the first time, we've got a system in place that makes sure that people who are out of work, that choose work, will always be better off. That was not the case before. If you look at the reports on universal credit, it has made a sea change to people's attitude to taking up work. And then also on personal independence payments. Personal independent payments and its predecessor, the DLA, if you take it together, they're up £3 billion in real terms since 2010. The number of people getting those payments is higher than it was in 2010. A lot of people are saying that's a failure
of your welfare reform.
No, I know what it is. No, what it is. No, look, you please allow me to respond, because it's actually a recognition that you have a welfare system that looks after the most vulnerable in society. And of course, I put disabled people at the top of the list. That's why spending has increased. And even during the life of this Parliament, it's projected it's going to rise by another billion. So I don't accept for a second that we've cut spending on disability payments.
I'm going to play one clip and give you a chance to answer. This is Graham Ellis. He's a lifelong Conservative voter. He's part of the Conservative Disability Group who's quit that today. Let's just hear what he had to say.
The first story I came across on the BBC News website was about the proposed changes to PIP and proposing to take 200,000 people out of the benefit and lowering the eligibility of others. And then I went on to read the story about the raising of the threshold for higher rate earners, and immediately it just hit me that it was a case of robbing the vulnerable to pay the rich. They're saying they need to make savings, and yet they can make tax cuts. And I'm sure people in this country would rather see people looked after rather than see huge tax cuts.
What's your answer to Graham Ellis?
What I'd say to Graham is please don't believe all the misinformation that's out there. I would not be part of a government that cuts benefits for disabled people.
You've just taken £1 billion, you're making £1 billion pounds of savings
we
from it.
have increased benefits for people that are disabled by £3 billion over the last Parliament, and they're rising by a further £1 billion projected during this Parliament. That's an increase.
We need to hold it there. Sajid, thank you very much indeed.